afternoon. Nice to have all of you here. My name is Anna Korhonen, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you and today's speakers, Nadir Kinossian and Sanna Turoma, to this session of our Aleksanteri alumni talks. So we'll soon hear Nadir talk about the text he's currently working on, and he'll explain a little bit more about what the stage of the text is. And his title is Stuck in Transition, Rebranding Post-socialism as the Global East, ? Nadir is a senior researcher at Leibniz Institute for Regional Geography at the Department of Regional Geography of Europe, where he's currently leading two fairly big projects on regional development. And Nadir's research interests are in the study of urban and regional governments, post-socialist city, cultural landscapes, Arctic and Russia, of course. And by his first education, Nadir is an architect who then became an urban planner and then political scientist and now a human geographer. I guess we could say so. So after Nadir's talk, Sanna Turoma will step in with her comments and questions to Nadir. And Sanna is professor of Russian language and culture at the Tampere University and also a longtime colleague at the Aleksanteri Institute for over a decade, if I'm right, before going to Tampere last year. And Sanna's interdisciplinary research covers topics and fields such as interactions between culture and society, intellectual histories, and imperial and spatial knowledge production in the Eurasian context, to put it shortly. And on the Q&A session, as usual, if you have been here before or in any seminars, of course, you can submit your questions in the chat, or else you can raise your hand and then I will invite you to open your mic and video if you wish to. And questions are obviously very warmly welcome. And as you see now, we're being recorded. It's only Nadir's talk that will be recorded, but the comments and the discussion part will not be recorded. Okay, so Nadir, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Anna, for your kind introduction and organizing the event. It's always a pleasure to participate in Aleksanteri Institute events in person or virtually, and I hope at some point we will be able to hold events in person and visit the institute and have discussions in the institute. Yeah, so I will proceed with my talk. Yeah, so today I would like to speak about our understanding of post-socialism and the apparent limitations of the concept and attempts to come up with some better conceptualization of post-socialist countries, for instance, by framing post-socialist or former Second World as the Global East. A few words about the institute where I work. It's the Leibniz Institute for Regional Geography, IFL. It's part of the Leibniz family that includes many research institutes. We are specializing in human geography, cartography, theory and history of geography. And we have a spatial focus on Eastern Europe and Germany. We are also a founder of the Leibniz Science Campus, Eastern Europe Global Arena. Please visit the website of the campus. There are many programs and funding sources available to people working on the topics of Eastern Europe. and funding is available for visits or organization of events, workshops and conferences. And between the 20th and 24th of April, Leibniz campus and BASIS will organize a joint conference on globalizing Eastern Europe, new perspectives on trans-regional entanglements. That will be held online, and you can join, and please do. It's an interesting event. The topic of post-socialism and global East came to our attention because for many years the discussion about post-socialism has been that the concept is not able to reflect accurately the processes and current condition, and needs to be replaced with something, but it has never been clear what can come to replace that concept. And recently a discussion started developing about the global East as more relevant concept. And from our perspective, geographical perspective, that appears as a new way of looking at spatiality of post-socialist countries and connections that post-socialist experiences can bring to other countries, and as an opportunity to contribute to theory building and be more active on the global arena, so to say, of knowledge production. That may sound optimistic, but nevertheless, that's the ambition, to somehow engage more and engage more productively with centers of knowledge production that are Western or criticized as Anglo-American and exclusive, and to challenge this unidirectional production of knowledge that goes from west to east. So what I'm presenting now are initial thoughts about framing the concept of the global East, although I'm not claiming any authorship. There are other people who have done much more work on that. But we would like to organize a group of authors to write an edited book on post-socialism and global East. And this is a project in making, and we would like to hear feedback and provocative questions and criticism and ideas that can help to develop that topic and these ideas further. So that's the ambition, and hopefully at some point we will be able to form this project as something more feasible and filled up with content. Post-socialism. To me, post-socialism, I understand it as a study of societies that were at some point in the past ruled by communist parties, or directly or indirectly ruled by Moscow, as Mike Gentile phrases it. So that conceptualization, of course, emphasizes the past, something that happened in the past and is no more the case. But post-socialism, of course, indicates that what has happened in the past is still defining in many ways the way those societies function. And there is a lot of truth about it. I guess no one would deny the significance of various legacies of state socialism. But at the same time, the concept of post-socialism has been criticized over and over again for its orientation towards the past and defining societies by something that they are not instead of what they are. The new criticism or the new attempt to revitalize post-socialism debate is to look at it as a composite concept that on the one hand has the notion of container, that's probably the conventional understanding, that sort of post-socialism is contained in those countries that once were socialist. Condition as current condition of those societies. And latest discussion is about attempts to de-territorialize that concept in a way to break up that container and see connections that post-socialist societies may have with other countries, and focus on processes and phenomena instead of deriving post-socialism from specific territorial entities, bounded entities. One particular paper that provoked discussion among colleagues and potential authors has been one by Martin Müller, published in Europe-Asia Studies in 2019, called provocatively "Goodbye Post-Socialism." And again, the criticism is about loss of connection with the actual object of study and backward orientation and calling for new framing of countries that used to be socialist, because post-socialism fails to adequately reflect and accommodate the current condition. That may be an interesting start for a discussion, and probably there is a lot of truth about limitations of post-socialism. However, saying goodbye is not easy, and it's not easy because of various aspects, but what appears important is the divergence that some societies, according to some authors, have gone through the transition and successfully completed it. But other societies are still far from completing the transition. This is, of course, a very, how to say, maybe criticized as a mechanical understanding of complex processes, because transition has limitations as a concept, and completing transition is also raises questions about how exactly that can be measured. But nonetheless, what is difficult to argue against is that post-socialism led to creation of societies that are quite different. Some are close to the Western model, and some are close to possibly some feudal model in Central Asia. That and at some point they all originated from the same political entity, the Soviet Union. If we look at Russia, there are also various studies that emphasize legacies of state socialism, structural, material legacies. And I will not try to introduce every study in detail, but there are different aspects such as spatial organization of production forces and allocation of population, etc., that has continued from the Soviet times into the current days, Russia. Also the quality of government and quality of institutions and power maximizing elites that lack sufficient checks, and that has been present in the literature, and what's legacies, the significance of legacies of the Soviet system for explaining the current condition of Russia. So to me, it sounds like goodbye post-socialism with exclamation mark may not be a simple thing. Rather, goodbye post-socialism should appear with a question mark, because there are countless post-socialisms, and some countries probably are able and happy to say goodbye to socialism and post-socialism, and other countries are strongly influenced by legacies. So, having said that, if we need a new concept for understanding post-socialist condition and post-socialist processes, can the Global East be one that can help to explain the diversity of the phenomena and diverging paths that we observe? And can the Global East as a concept be that bridge that connects our work in the post-socialist world with broader debates on politics, development, institutions? And can it help us to contribute to theorizing at international level, as opposed to be sort of locked in that self-referential group of post-socialist scholars? But we need to know what the Global East is before we can make any judgment. So the Global East appears as a vague concept at the moment. And what it argues that there are countries that are lost in between the global north and the global south, and they do not belong fully or meaningfully to either, because they are too rich to be the global south, but still too poor to be the global north, and they are Western, but not completely Western, and they are sort of trapped in that in-between position where they cannot sort of find their home. That can be an interesting poetical metaphor to describe the condition of post-socialism. But of course, we need some more specific and more focused ways of conceptualizing and operationalizing the concept of the global East. And this is still the process in the making. There may be three elements of the concept that can help to conceptualize it and understand it better. One is de-territorialized reading of the region. The second is Global East as an emancipatory project. And the third one is Global East as a new geographical imagination. And I'll try to explain because it's still quite a vague concept. What is meant by de-territorialization is that instead of focusing on the bounded space and territory, we treat it as epistemic space, liminal space in between north and south. That's according to Martin Müller. If we look at the global East as epistemic space, then we are not necessarily limited to any territorial concept or any political bloc or any political history that opens post-socialist world to the world as a whole, and we look at processes and concept that can connect processes in post-Soviet, post-socialist world with any other part of the world. So that opens, that breaks up the territorialized vision of post-socialism. But of course, at the same time, it creates the problem of selectivity and inclusion, exclusion. Second, the Global East as emancipatory project. This should address the problem of uneven connections or power relationship between the Global East and the North, where ideas are generated in the West and then translated into the East, and theories are generated in the West and then tested in the East. But it's a one-way street in a way, that theories are not created in the East, and the East is seen as a receiver, as inferior, intrinsically inferior to the North. And that has a tradition in colonial anthropology, where the West has been a universal measurement of progress and modernity, and the rest was measured against the West to be found lacking or inferior or not developed. So the globalist claims that, as a concept, claims that it creates that platform for the globalist to speak back to the hegemonic core and challenge the hegemony of the North and the West. Of course, the question is how to do that, and it's not yet clear how. Third point is that we need new geopolitical imaginations to look at the world as full of cases and places that all deserve attention and have the right to contribute to the knowledge production. And that's why scholars such as Jenny Robinson talk about cosmopolitan production of knowledge. That in a way is challenging the monopoly of the West to make judgments and to generate knowledge. And the globalist as a concept claims that it wants to destabilize this imagination of the world where there is that binary geopolitical opposition between the developed North and underdeveloped South. Again, the question is how, in what terms, in what steps that can take place. So I've tried to put as an initial step to try to conceptualize that comparison of post-socialism and the globalist, to put that in a table that would attempt to sketch the differences. And of course, that table can be developed further. It's not a complete, but I hope I've managed to depict some elements of that comparison that can help us to understand the difference and facilitate conceptualization further. So ontologically, post-socialism is quite clear. It refers to countries that used to be socialist and no more socialist. So there is no kind of debate what is that thing that we study, and that's why post-socialism is a powerful concept, because it gives an immediate indication of what the object of study is. The global East is much more vague and broad and inclusive, claiming that it can be any liminal space in between global North and South. It doesn't have to be located in any polity or any historical geography, since we kind of erase that territorial division of the world and we look at phenomena rather than territorial elements. Axiologically, post-socialism is split between Westernization and the critique of Westernization. So it is a constant argument and debate. The part that is, I mean, it's a very basic division, I would say, but the part that stands on the transition positions would argue for westernization, and the part of scholars who stand on critical positions would question that. The globalist argues quite explicitly against westernization as a universal management. It says the de-westernization of our understanding of things such progress and development. The West cannot be a universal measurement, universal metric, they argue. A study object for post-socialism, again, it's clear it's former socialist countries, and globalist is open to any liminal society, can be located in the West, spatially, but bear the qualities of the South or the East. As a political project, post-socialism, again, there is a split. Some scholars would criticize transition as teleological and primitive, and others would argue that transition is the way to achieve development, prosperity, bring freedom, etc. The globalist, as a political project, claims that it wants to essentialize the East, put it back on the map, and emancipate the East from an even power relationship with the North. So the question is how that can help us to understand processes in Russia, because it can be applied to any post-socialist countries, but because my expertise is probably most with Russia, I can speak about Russia with more confidence. So what can be observed? I've put here some bullet points that I hope depict the case of Russia. So the growing role of the state is obvious. The Russian state appears as a key player and in political and economic life. Russia emerges as a hostile geopolitical power, hostile to the West or to the global North. And in current discourses, there are two mutually reinforcing trends that are constructed. One, that new geopolitical expansionism and attempts to influence global processes through various means, including cyberspace, physical space, including military action, and at home combined with the image of the besieged fortress. Russian state has been criticized as repressive, extortionate, and kleptocratic agent controlling economic life. At the same time, although the Russian economy is smaller than economies of many developed countries, of Western countries, the concentration of power and control in the hands of the state, in relative terms, is much more than any Western country can enjoy. That's why the Russian state has greater capacity to mobilize the economy for its own perceived aims and strategies. thinking back on the concept of the global East, what can that concept help us? How it can help us to form research agendas for Russia or other post-socialist countries? I think that the de-territorialization, the first element of the global East as a concept, as a composite concept, the idea of de-territorialization can be productive and encouraging and empowering research, because it can help to put the phenomena of state capitalism or Russian state in connection to other states and build cross-national comparisons by looking at economic development projects, at spatial development, and looking at institutional, legal, organizational aspects of the functioning of the state. The Global East as emancipatory project, I perceive as much more problematic, because the goal of emancipation of the East sounds benevolent and sounds as it deserves attention and deserves working on it. But to understand that and implement that, we need to, in my opinion, understand the impact of state socialism or communist ideology on research, especially in social sciences. And I believe to a large extent that condition of backwardness in research is caused by the impact of communism on social sciences, where social sciences for many years were reduced to reproducing the dogmas of Marxism-Leninism. That's why it requires additional time and resources to catch up with Western centers of knowledge production. Also, the claim that the global East should be equal. It should be equal, probably. But in what terms can it be equal? This claim is also difficult to substantiate. As an ideal, of course, there should be equal relationship, but the reality of politics or economics is not that countries are equal. And the global East is in disadvantaged positions, vis-a-vis more powerful centers. And that is difficult to deny. In terms of Russia, the question of emancipation, who should Russia be emancipated from, considering the history of colonial relationship within the country and the new structures of power and economic power that have emerged after the collapse of the Soviet system. With regard to the global South, it is relatively clear that they want to be emancipated from the former colonizers. But with regard to Russia, this is not clear. Who should Russia be emancipated from? From the global North or from its own oligarchic power structures, or from the predatory state. And I guess that argument can go in different directions. The third point, the third element of the globalist, the new geographical imagination. It also sounds as a benevolent and enriching perspective to challenge the monopoly of the West on the production of knowledge and authority that is obvious in understanding of science and knowledge production. But that call to destabilize geopolitical imagination also bears some risks that by destabilizing West as hegemonic power, at what point we distinguish between relationship of uneven power, political and economic, and fundamental ideas that form the West, such as democracy and liberalism. And I personally think that that call for new geographical imaginations also bears risks that by denying the authority of the West, some scholars would also challenge ideas or universal attractiveness of ideas such as democracy and economic liberalism. And here we have to think carefully what is to be challenged. If we challenge the West, does that mean that authoritarian regimes in the global East should also be considered as equal or legitimate? And that I have doubts about. So to conclude, I believe that post-socialism as a concept is still relevant as long as we observe legacy of socialism and as long as they can explain the functioning of societies today by looking at various factors that have been inherited, and they cover many aspects of life, from allocation of production forces, transport infrastructure, to values and attitudes. And it's extremely difficult to say that that was the point when they stopped affecting societies. I guess we can talk about degree of influence, but it's difficult to say that at some point we passed that and they are no longer significant. Also, with post-socialism, as I tried to indicate, there is always that criticism going on about the teleological approach to transition. But I think a lot of it is misplaced because while there are general principles of democracy and market that should be considered as universally valuable, there are specific decisions or specific aspects of implementation, such as the content and pace of reforms, that could be criticized, and choices could have been made in different registers, but that should not be understood as as the limitation of democracy or market as general concepts. I think in that sense, post-socialism takes some undeserved, unwarranted blame for some policy decisions made within the frame of transition to market and democracy. And I think that can be separated. As I said, globalist as a concept needs better conceptualization. And the moment it appears as a quite vague concept that doesn't have a clear set of criteria for inclusion or exclusion, or conceptualization or operationalization. The three elements of the Global East as a concept, de-territorialization and emancipation and destabilization of dominant imaginations, I think have different value, so to say. That de-territorialization can help to connect the region to broader debates, and through comparative research, through the focus on processes and phenomena liberated from the containerized understanding, the territorial understanding of post-socialism as being placed within certain spatial context. But I think emancipation and challenging the geographical imaginations, we have to be much more careful about, because it depends a lot in what context and in what direction we would apply this concept. And there are certain risks associated with that. So that's it from my side. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nadir, so much for this rich analysis and dissecting of the concepts of post-socialism and Global East.